This video analyzes the achievements of this boy after 24 months of ABR program with a specific emphasis on sitting. I believe that the visuals speak for themselves and the results, the functional achievements by this stage are self-evident. Therefore, I think that the greatest benefit for you from this video would be educational if we were to go into the details and explain the nuances of the transitions of sitting. And let's focus on that. First important distinction that I want you to concentrate on is the difference between two domains of sitting, two most important domains of sitting, namely the edge sitting, that's the edge sitting, and the tailor sitting. Sometimes people use different terms, Indian sitting, cross-leg sitting, whatever. I would use the tailor sitting as their basic reference. These sitting styles, edge sitting and tailor sitting, they have a lot of similarities, but they have essential differences as well. Tailor sitting is the one which typically comes earlier. In fact, you just need to follow the development of a healthy child and you would realize that tailor sitting is indeed the phase that comes much earlier. In order to understand why the tailor sitting comes much earlier, let's get back to our fundamentals of the cone, inverted cone of the sitting position. Well, this inverted cone, as we can see, has two major components. The overall size of an outlet, to say so, meaning the total range of controllable movements that the child have moving away from the central axis of sitting. And the second thing is the size of the inlet, or we can also think of the precision of the inlet, because sitting has to be based purely on the pelvic floor, on the bottom of the pelvis, with the legs being free to move. And that's what happens earlier in the tailor sitting position. That's where we observe the emergence of the sitting platform earlier, again, just following the sequence of the rotational transitions of the leg. Let's follow the tailor sitting development in this boy in order to understand the components better. First of all, that's where we started from. Legs being completely unbendable. Rigid, stiff legs which didn't allow even the possibility of the comfortable bending. Later on, we were able to see that the legs became more bendable, but still that room for movement was limited. We couldn't effectively bend them. We didn't have enough of the outwards rotation to allow for that position. And only 18 months into the process, we were able to see that this boy finally achieved the tailor sitting position. However, let's look at the details. In the previous video, I have pointed out for you that he was too weak in his trunk to sustain his position all the way, and therefore he was using this fake wedge of extra support where the chest and the abdomen were touching the legs, providing him with the extended kind of cross-section of the support. But that wasn't all. He used another extra compensation, to say so, mechanism. If you look at the legs, you see the legs are rotated outwards, thus providing artificial extended base of the support. And that's how this boy was able to maintain the position. And that's what you see. That's why it's much more comfortable, or it was much more comfortable for him. In order to release the hand for playing, he needed to bend all the way forwards, again closing this wedge. Let's have a look at the change today. You can see three major transformations. One is the appearance of the space between the ground and the leg. So he no longer needs that base, extended base that he was using before. Another major thing that we see is that this wedge of the direct fold of the chest and abdomen over the legs is no longer necessary for him. He has enough strength within the cross section, within the circumference and the overall compressional strength of the entire upper body to be able to sustain that vertical position. And the third component that we can see is that he obviously needs much less of the arms involvement for that self-supported extras. Because at the previous stage he had two options. If he wanted to lift the head, he needed to hyperextend the arms, and if he wanted to go further down, well, and bend the arms, he was actually going much lower with the upper body. Let's have a look at the longer chain of positioning in the tailor sitting in order to understand it better. Well, what you're seeing, he's bending forwards, not using the arms for the support, that's very clear. Reaching for the ball, which is an important upgrade in itself, because again at the previous stage we have seen that that coordinated action of being able to look at the object and bring the arm to it at the same time, that wasn't possible. And then after that, he first lifts his upper body from that bent forwards position, but that's a separate lift of the body, as you can see. It doesn't drag the arm. And then he utilizes the arm again separately from the upper body. Let's watch it once again. You see, very distinct two phases. First of all, that's the upper body movement. The arm stays in place. And on top of this, he then adds the extra reach of the head. And once he stabilizes the upper body, what happens next? That's the phase of the selective arm movement. Whilst the head, neck, and the shoulder girdle together with obviously the rest of the body, they stay still. So this is very, very important to understand. Selectivity of the arm movement being based on the inverted cone of the support. And I hope that you can now interpret the things properly. Now you can see that all that bending, whether it's the bending forwards, whether it's bending sideways or backwards or whatever, these are all the directions of movement within that expanded or extended inverted cone of the support. And that's a very easy reference which one could use in order to analyze the transitions and the progress of the tailor sitting position or edge sitting position, in fact any weight bearing development. Once we understood how the tailor sitting changes and works, then our next step is the edge sitting. Well, obviously today we can see that his level of support is low. It's the mid-pelvis support. And I believe that from the previous videos you remember that the starting level of support was by the shoulders or by the upper thorax, and even that level of support didn't really help him to control the parts above. Let's have a look. That's the level of the support all the way up at the chest level. That's folding. Arching or folding, no effect. If the level of support was shifted lower, well, the boy was just dropping down. And we have seen that even with the maximum level of the support, like by the shoulder girdle, the head was still dropping backwards helplessly, so effectively he didn't have any meaningful circumference of the support at that stage. Later on, several months into the process, just under a year, we were able to see that there was an obvious level of progress. From the very top level of the support and his inability to deliver anything useful, he actually progressed to the much more advanced stage, which could be seen from two aspects. One is the level of the support, which went significantly down from the shoulders all the way down to the mid-thorax. And two, which is even more important, that now with this support, he was actually being able to do the active movements and kind of counterbalancing of the components of the body which are above that level. So if he is supported by the mid-thorax, that means that he was able to do certain moves controllably, although poorly, of course, with the head movements, with the arm movements, and so on. So that's the clear stage of transition. And now I believe that within this context, the shift of the support to the mid-pelvis level makes a lot more sense. And I will continue to repeat that same thing over and over again. Nothing emerges out of nowhere. You can see that his evolution through ABR has been a gradual transition. Further down, further down, further down, further down. And that's the key. It's not a certain immediate jump or immediate leap from nothing to really comfortable and really controllable position. He didn't learn it in that way. Basically, he has earned it through the gradual improvements of the level of the support. And therefore, we can also understand what do we expect for the future. We want to see those levels of the support moving further and further down. That's the calculable and sort of understandable path to the independent sitting. Let's move to the next characteristics of the edge sitting. Because here we were discussing the trunk support, but there is another domain of the edge sitting related to the suspended arm support. We'll start with the two-handed arm support. You can see that today he's very comfortable with that type of support, and actually it's even excessive for him. He's completely relaxed, and at the same time you can observe that he is being held very far from the body just by his wrists, or actually by his hands. Let's get back into the past and recapitulate the stages prior. You can see that somewhat 8 months after the start of ABR, he was still not able to use his arms for their proper support. And that's obviously a very major difference. Another major domain of analysis of edge sitting position is the support by the single arm. Well, that's in that sense a more advanced stage. Suspended arm support on one side. Obviously that requires an even greater strength of the shoulder girdle comparing to the two-handed support. And again, let's get back to the past and see where we started from. In the beginning, it was very obvious that a single arm support, even when it was stronger right side, wasn't sufficient to provide any extra support. Because you can see, if the arm and the body, they move at the same angular speed, if you were to look at it like this, right? So the head and the arm, they move at the same time. So basically that means that the arm doesn't provide any extra benefits from the supportive role. And today what we are seeing that a single support, single side support, minimal support, even on the weaker left side, is sufficient to give him enough confidence to deliver the selective movements of the head, confidently control the upper body, and then having the selective movement of the other arm. And again, you can observe the same sequence. Trunk is staying stable, the arm moves separately. So, what we're observing? We're observing that in all three domains, or in all key domains of the sitting, whether it's the edge sitting with the trunk support, whether it's the edge sitting with a single suspended arm support, whether it's the edge sitting with two-handed support, we can observe the consistent progress, which eventually leads to this: his ability to sit unsupported in the sofa. Of course, sitting in the sofa, that's the extended surface of contact and so on. It's not like completely edge sitting position, but that's from the viewpoint of the practicality, that's a major step forwards. And again, what you can see, that this level has been achieved through step-by-step gains. I might get you bored with this repetition, but I want to make sure that that's really clear. Nothing miraculous, stage by stage. And for those of you who want to understand and know even more, we can get even further into the details and actually try to understand where this progress comes from. Well, what we're observing here, we're observing the much improved platform of sitting that this boy has today. We're observing much stronger trunk. We're observing much greater space between the rib cage and the pelvis, meaning the greater height of the abdominal space. Let's refresh the memory. This picture is taken about 15 months earlier. So, what is the emphasis here? First of all, the fact that the space between the rib cage and the pelvis started to emerge, but it was still very limited. What is even more interesting here is the review of the platform of sitting. What you are seeing, that upon the attempt to move the actual buttocks, there is not much of the contact area to be seen. What you're observing, that his entire platform of sitting is actually the back of the leg, not the bottom of the pelvis. That's the key thing, and that's the key challenge. That's why the moment that the pelvis is being put in contact with the ground, the legs, they go off and he loses the balance completely. Let's have a look now. Today we're observing that the legs are separately movable, and you can see that the movement of the leg itself doesn't bring the detachment of the pelvis off the ground. So that's a visible and clear transition. But of course, talking about the building blocks, the core preceding fundamentals of the structural segmentation basis that provides the necessary foundation for the sitting position, we have to remember about the true basics, head mobility. And you can see whether he was supine, whether he's in sitting position, we're able to observe selective movements of the head. That's of an absolutely paramount importance. And I'll show you the closer look. You can see that the head could move selectively up and down and rotationally. And that's a really great view, the one that I'm really proud of, because that's the demonstration of an exact precision of the head movement and the true freedom of the rotational head movement from the shoulder girdle. Let's get back to some pictures from the past. I remind you that to start with, there was no movement of the head at all. Everything was moving like a unit. But even just over a year ago, what we were seeing this still remaining lateral rigidity of the head movement. And you see, when the head was moved backwards, you can see this dramatic neck shortening and the resultant shift of the arms upwards. And this is really a great view, demonstrating you the rotational movement of the head, the way that it was possible at that stage. You can see it started to emerge, but it was still very limited. Tilted backwards, shoulders being high up, range being limited, and obviously you can also see how narrow are the shoulders, right? Head pretty much has the same size as the rest of the shoulder girdle. And you can see now, he has got much broader, and he shows us this clear and precise head movements. So these are the building blocks, but there are more of them. Let's have a look at the combination of three things: independent rotation of the head, movement of the shoulder girdle, and the movement of the trunk. We can see that the upper body now could be rotated easily without getting his pelvis off the ground. That's really a major achievement. And at the same time, you can see that the legs could be moved separately from the shoulder girdle. And once again, I'll point out the major restriction that he used to have before. being immovable, whatever direction was taken. Later on, the mobility has improved, but we have still seen that the pelvis was still moving together with the rest of the body. And he didn't maintain the contact with the ground. He didn't use the arm for the support. And once again, we can see how clearly separate are the rotational movements of the shoulder and how much of the sitting platform this boy has in respect to the ground. So I want you to understand the mechanics. I want to take the mystery factor, the kind of lottery winning factor out of this mechanics of the emergence and the development of the sitting. And as you watch the details, you can understand better and better how the individual components, such as this clear demonstration of the developing independence within the shoulder girdle, get combined together, like this one. The mobility at the waistline, counterbalancing of the shoulders, and expanded surface of contact of the pelvis with the ground. How all these components, they start reinforcing each other, leading to the ability to have the sustainable edge sitting and tailor sitting position. And that's why he's so comfortable here, because he's confident he has the room for movement. And I'm getting you back to that fundamental idea. What was that all about? It was all about developing this increasing inverted cone of the support, where the child has to be able to get the movements rotationally, forwards, backwards, and left and right tilting. Again, no mysteries, pure, organized step-by-step work. And as the movable components get more and more integrated, we're seeing better and better coordination. This is the view from the back that demonstrates the protective reaction of the arm together with the counterbalancing effect within the trap. And together, of course, with this extended, expanding circumference of sitting. So this is a very, very informative image, and I want you to understand this once again. These are the building blocks. That's how the function gets together. These are the pieces of the jigsaw. That's how this puzzle gets gradually put together. And in order to give a bit more of the perspective into the future and into the more advanced phases, I want you to look at this, the development of the supported standing. Of course, one can say that his leg positioning is still very poor here. No questions about that. But that's exactly the opposite aspect that we are highlighting. That, in fact, the quality of the standing and the control of it is to a major extent, or to a greatest extent, is defined and dependent upon the quality of the strength of the upper body. So that's exactly what you are seeing here. That with two arms support, this boy is able to bend forwards, look around, get different movements of the upper body, generally adjust. And therefore, the more comfortable he is at the top, the less challenges and the discomforts he has for his legs. Just have a look at this. So with two hands, he was really comfortable. But now, that's an extra challenge. He's only given one arm for the support, and that's a weaker left arm. Nonetheless, what we are seeing, he's descending gradually. He's not falling like a single block. He is descending. And then, once he's given the second arm for the support, what happens? He recovers, uses the developed strength of his shoulder girdle and the stability of the pelvis, and then propels himself up. In order to realize how much his standing has changed comparing to the past, it's enough to look at these pictures taken 15 months prior. You can see that at that stage he's extremely stiff. He's unable to do any local movements in standing. His arms are pretty much locked in this W position, and he's just being one completely rigid, stiff unit. And please have a look at the new abilities, how smoothly he is able to descend, the variety of the movements that he is delivering by readjusting himself, using the arms, repositioning the upper body, and so on. So that's a very clear transformation, even over such an advanced weight-bearing position as standing. So this is the next domain, the next horizons that I want you to look at, that in fact the development of the weight bearing of the upper body in sitting, sort of half body, is the prerequisite, is the absolutely necessary building block for the next phases as well. And once again, I repeat that none of this would have been possible, none of this wonderful control of the descent and deceleration from standing to sitting would have been possible without the major transitions in the mobility of the arms, control of the head, strength of the trunk. I would like to highlight that these changes that we analyzed in such a detail, they are the result of the hard work and continuous sustained effort which was put by this boy's mother. She has delivered about 1,500 manual ABR hours. She has delivered several thousand of the machine hours. This is a significant bulk of strengthening work which translated into that development of the compressional strength of the entire trunk, including the pelvis, including the links, including the neck, and so on. And this progress has been earned. That's the key idea. And that earning of this progress has been developed as the step-by-step evolution, accumulation of strength. There hasn't been anything forceful. But on the other hand, people do tend to ask me, well, does that mean that 1,500 hours for any spastic quadriplegic child are meant to guarantee the same type of progress, the same level of progress? Well, unfortunately, no. The results, the changes are different. Sometimes things work faster, sometimes things work slower. The key idea is not to kind of hook you up to a certain number of hours or whatever. The idea is to show that if you are set to work, if you are prepared to put organized, sustainable effort, things could be improved even for a very severe child, for a child who, under usual circumstances, under kind of standard GMFCS based prognosis or expectations, doesn't have much to look forward to. And that's the key idea. Progress is possible, and progress should follow the step-by-step accumulation. That's the main emphasis. Not the exact number of hours, not the exact number of months, but the steps of the transformation, the logic of change, the logic of the development. That's the key idea. Well, thank you for going that far. This is a long video, required a lot of attention from you, but I do hope this information has been educational, has been useful, has been helpful, and it will allow you to expand the understanding of your own child and will allow you to see with a better clarity the spectrum of options that you have for your kid to improve into the future and for you to understand better the avenues that you can take to explore. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for your attention, and we do hope that you are going to ask questions, that you are going to give us the feedback, that you're going to get engaged in a conversation. Because only through continued conversation, only through the dialogue, we can be moving forwards. We could be delivering better results and better progress for the children and finding new avenues for improving their future.